Welcome to another episode of Jon'S Garage. Today we're working on the 73 Camaro once again. So then right here is where we got the rest of our brake stuff. Just ordered the stuff in the mail. Here we got front brake hose. So we got two of these. Rear brake hose. Front brake pads. Brand new calipers. Stock stuff to try to keep the cost down. The only thing I didn't buy was rotors, because surprisingly this car has two brand new rotors on. You're not going to be able to see it, but this is what I'm going to be working on today. I'm going to jack up the front end, take off both wheels, and it starts to mock up where the caliper is going to mount. It's got brand new bolts on it. I'm going to hook up the brake hose, and then I'm going to figure out where to mount the front brake hard lines to where the hose connects. It's important to take notice of whether or not you are looking at the driver's side or passenger side caliper. I'm not here to insult anybody's intelligence, but for the newcomers who may not know, there is a difference. When this is bolted on to the rotor, you want the bleeder to be pointed up, not down. For instance, if it's on the passenger side, the brake hose goes towards the body. If this was on the passenger side, the bleeder would be down. So here we have a driver's side caliper. Take your brake pad, you got to put this clip on. This fits in the caliper. You want to just hook it on the first side and then push until it snaps in on the bottom. Now, when you stick this in, push the tab down a little bit, snaps right into place. That clip will hold the brake pad in place. The front one doesn't need that because it has tabs on the bottom and on the top that hook onto the caliper. So when it's in there properly, it can't slide in and out. But if you do notice, it can move around a little bit, like that. Up and down a little bit, and the left to right a little bit. This could cause squeaking in your brakes. So I recommend going to your auto parts store and getting a jar, a little tube of this disc brake quiet. So the caliper's only getting in contact with it here and over here. So we take some of this, apply a thin amount on both sides. Just take your finger. I guess it's kind of a lot. You really don't need this much. That way when you stick it in there, that substance is creating like a barrier between the two, and it should help minimize the squeaking between the brakes. There's a lot of other things that go into squeaky brakes, such as poor brake pad material, or once these are worn out completely, then they will also squeak. And the piston is so large that you don't need to put much of this red stuff on at all. Just a tiny bit. Not use as much as we did last time. Now, with the bolts out, I already removed them. We are ready to slide this caliper onto the car. Typically, when you are replacing used brakes and you are reusing the caliper, you have to make sure this caliper is pressed all the way in. Because it's brand new, we're remanufactured, it's already pressed in, and should slide on fairly easily. Take your caliper bolts and they thread in through the back. These ones in particular, you need a very large Allen key. Another good tip is to turn the steering wheel, so this way you got more access. So right under here we got the rear brake line put up temporarily by zip ties since we're waiting on those clips to come in the mail. These pre-bent lines worked out really well where they perfectly fall into place going all the way up to the proportioning valve. Runs right down along here, bends in the same spot and area. This will be tighter up to the body once we get those clips in the mail, and even though it's pre-bent, there's some imperfections and you got to bend it a little bit, but it bends very easily by hand. We had to take the emergency brake apart, the cable apart, to get this line up over it. Meaning the emergency cable has to be underneath the brake line. So we got the brake line that comes up to here. We sanded, spray painted our bracket, new rubber hose, comes right down. I had to get a longer bolt to bolt it to this block to the rear differential. And then both lines run straight across into our new wheel cylinders inside our brand new brakes. So now we can say from the whole rear brake lines are all complete. Run all the way up to the proportioning valve, which we'll go look at right now. So right down in here, we did have to bend this a little bit because every proportioning valve coming from different factories might have different mounting locations, but it lined up pretty close. We had to bend it a tiny bit to get it to work. But that's it. From here back, the rear brakes are done. All right, so it's another day here in the garage. We finally got some parts in. We got some clips for our brake lines. I need 2 different sizes. So we got this stuff from an advertisement on eBay. We basically just needed this bracket here. This is for the driver's side brake hose. Hose comes up to one side and the hard brake line comes down to the other. The guy also included in his eBay advertisement the passenger side clip, 2 bolts, and these are the clips that holds the hose to the brackets. And some dirt. Yeah, this one is filthy. We didn't even need this bracket, but we were able to, some people were selling these brackets for 20 bucks just for one. We got this whole setup for 15 bucks shipped to us. So if come on over here, we'll see that with these brake line clamps, I have 2 different sizes. One is 3/8 for the bigger line and 5/16 for the smaller line. An issue I ran into with the eBay advertisements was that they didn't actually list the thickness of these lines. We have a coil wrapped around them that goes from the 2 fronts and the back line. So we need to account for the total thickness of the line. Because I don't have a caliper to properly measure it that way, we're using a small adjustable wrench, putting it on the line, tightening her up so you can pull it in and out pretty snugly, and then you measure it. And then right there we were able to see 5/16 and then 3/8 for the back line, and we knew which clamps to order that were correct. Because we are no longer using the factory dual line clamps, we're using single line clamps now. You should always use your safety protection.
Oh gosh, what about me? Wait, it's fine in my face.
Is it?
Yeah, you don't gonna protect the cameraman?
When it comes to installing these brackets, this hole here is for our bolts that holds the bracket down. And right here we got a tab. Those 2 will tell us how this guy gets situated down in here. We see a hole here and a hole here. One's too big, and there we go, one has threads. So this guy's gonna drop in here. There we are. Throw as much as we can by hand, and then tighten it all the way down with a 1/2 inch socket. When you're snaking this brake line down in there, you want to kind of line it up, but you want to tighten up this fitting first, since the proportioning valve is not going to be moving anywhere, and these lines are soft enough that we could bend them a little bit by hand. So that's tight enough to hold it in place, but loose enough where we can move it where we need to. Coming back under here, oh, we're pretty close. Let's bend this back. There we go. Adjust it a little bit. Another thing to note, whenever you take a hose off of the caliper, you must replace these copper washers. The point of the copper washer is to keep the hydraulic fluid inside the hose at the connection of going into the caliper. And here you can tell, you see those where it gets crushed? It's got these marks on both sides. Those crush purposely to seal any imperfection between the surface of the brake hose and the caliper. We got 2 brand new ones right here. It's important to note, instead of having 6 points, one is rounded. And due to that being rounded, this hose actually goes onto the caliper a certain way. For instance, if we put it on this way, and we naturally move the hose over, the rounded half is on top, and we need it to be on the bottom. We got the hose bolt tightened down. We had double checked before we made the connection tight that this will slip right in. Are you fucking kidding me? And then it'll slip right in, no problem. Now I can take this rubber boot off, the cap, and I'll bend this a little bit and get it onto the hose.
Why are you out here with all that double cheeked up on a Sunday?
Sunday. This is where a parts card really comes in handy. If you come over here, you can go in on that side if you want.
Wait, how?
Can you open that door?
Not really.
Pretty sure you can.
I have shit all over here.
Oh, you able to climb up there? Hold on. Could you believe that whoever previously owned this car, they took the pin out of the brake pedal so that there's no way to attach it to the booster push rod. This is where owning a parts car really comes in handy. I was able to have my dad run outside and he popped the pin off. So we're going to slide it in here now so we could attach our brake pedal to our brand new brake system. All right, so I could not get that pin pressed into the brake pedal while this was in the car. I used a C-clamp and a socket on the other end, and I was trying to press it in, couldn't get it. I got so frustrated, I decided to pull this out. I stuck it up here in the vise. I tightened it down. Wanted the vise to be as close to the hole as possible. And I took a hammer and I just hammered it and it actually went right in. The reason for having the clamps so close to this is because you don't want to bend the pedal in any way. Time to take the whole brake assembly, well, brake and clutch assembly. What was that?
I stepped on that.
Oh, bubble wrap. Time to put this whole pedal assembly back in the car and attach our brake booster rod to our new peg on the brake pedal, and then we'll be ready to bleed the brakes. I'm gonna close the door. Careful, the seat's not bolted down. But we got Nicole in the front seat. We got the booster bolted back up. The brake pedal is in. Steering column is back up. Now we're gonna pour some brake fluid in. All right, give it a slow pump. The brake.
Did it do it?
Mm-hmm.
That was the brake.
Yeah.
On the right? Should I go all the way down?
Yeah. So here, go ahead, press the brake.
Slow.
We got two fittings in the portioning valve that are leaking, so I'm gonna give those, see if they're a little loose, probably tighten them up and that'll fix it. But I just wanted to show you guys. All right, so this is a same project, different day. We got every single fitting tightened up. There is no leaks in this brake system at all. So right now I'm going to show you real quick the brake line that we have going from the front to the rear. We got all the clips in position, all bolted down properly. So we're going to show you that, and then we're going to bleed the brakes using the old rubber hose in a jar trick. So here we got the brake line all the way in the back. We got clip there, comes down the frame rail, clip. And then that goes up to the brake booster. So here we got our jar filled up with brake fluid. The hose is all the way in. Lid's on tight. We're gonna take this now and go bleed. We're gonna start at the furthest point from the master cylinder. Right here we got our hose. We loosened up the bleeder and we just plugged the hose into the end here.
It's peeking in.
And we're gonna set this down here. And I'm gonna go in the car, start pumping the brakes, and you're gonna see hopefully some bubbles of air come out of this line. You'll see it in the jar.
Ooh, yep. Oh, it's flowing. Overflowing, yep.
Okay. Okay, so through trial and error, as we just saw, you really should leave some empty space inside this jar, because when you're pressing on the brake pedal, the fluid's being pushed in and we overflow it a little bit. No big deal. We would fix it and move on to the rest. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So this was my first time using this method to try to bleed the brakes. I was always interested in those self-bleeder kits, and I've seen a tutorial online how you can do this yourself for pretty much free. As you could tell, we didn't get much of a result using this. All the bubbles that you saw in the footage was the air that was already in this line. And my wife was there watching, and she saw maybe only a couple really tiny bubbles actually come out of the fittings. This is mainly because we had previously bled the brakes by ourselves. Meaning, she was in the car pumping the brakes. Once it got really firm, she held the pedal to the floor. I opened up the bleeder until I got a steady stream of brake fluid coming out, and then I would close it. And based on this, the test results of this, that method works really well at getting all the air out. This also works well if you're by yourself. I would do this again if I was on my own. Because you can just set it there, pump the brakes a handful of times, and then you know you're going to be fine. But if you have two people, I would much rather do that from now on, because this method, when you are taking it off the, off the bleeder, then it makes a big mess. All the fluid that's in this line comes out. I have these oil absorbing pads that, oh god, I had to dry everything with. I would probably make this hose significantly shorter for my next time around, but hey, you live and learn. So we're just bolting on one of the pizza cutter tires to the front. Just throwing 2 lug nuts in it. We're gonna give it a spin, and then Nicole's gonna hit the brakes, and we'll see if she stops on a dime or not. Hit the brakes. Ooh!